Hello everybody, Ben Marcus here, the Raptors Digest, breaking down some under-the-radar free agents that are out on the market this summer. Well, not this summer, Riker. Obviously, free agency is happening in the fall sometime, but the Toronto Raptors, they have a interesting offseason coming up in terms of roster moves, and we've been breaking down a lot, but we're going to take a look at some of the lesser-known names on the free agency market this year, Riker.
Ben, free agency, it is the NBA's Christmas. This is the most exciting time of the year where we get to dive deep into our bag of tricks, put on the Raptors hat, pretend we're the GMs for a day, Ben. There are some guys, I'm going to say some are interesting, some are downright awful, but we're going to break them all down, Ben.
All right. Well, we'll get right into the list. So the first player we want to talk about, I didn't realize he was a free agent this season, but Jordan Clarkson, who has honestly been on an absolute tear since he's been traded to the Utah Jazz this season, and even at the start of the year with the Cavs. He's been averaging about 15 points per game this season, being an absolute bucket. You know, he's a two-guard, small forward. He's not the highest percentage. Shoots about 37% from three, but on 6 attempts, so that's on that volume, that's a pretty solid percentage, but this guy is an absolute bucket. He's sort of growing into that Jamal Crawford role in the NBA, just being able to go out there, explode, not necessarily be the greatest of defenders, but just he could really get us points. And that was something the Raptors really struggled with in the playoffs this season.
If you didn't say it, I was going to say it, Ben. To me, he looks like he has a similar type movement. Now, I wouldn't say his handles are as clean as that of Jamal Crawford, but if I was to give a player reference, that's how I was swaying as well. So it's funny that you were able to mention that first, Ben. And I think that this guy, he would be the type of player that the Raptors could have used in the playoffs. That we're going to probably say that a ton of times when making comparisons now. And he's another guy that could probably come in at a smaller contract, be really good whether you need him off the bench or if you want to slip him into the starting unit when you're resting players for some games. He's not the guy, he's not going to lead the team as much as somebody like Fred VanVleet or Kyle Lowry would be able to, obviously, but in terms of getting a pure scorer out there who knows how to score from different points on the floor, he would be an improvement. But the one thing, or not an improvement, he would be an asset, but the one thing I want to say is he played so well coming onto the Jazz, who really needed a spark like that. I don't see them not re-signing this guy, Ben.
Yeah, that's a thing to look at with all these guys. But Jordan Clarkson is an unrestricted free agent, and obviously the Jazz had that 3-1 flameout that no one's really talking about in the first round. So maybe he'll be looking to maybe go to a different team, and obviously Donovan Mitchell's there playing at the shooting guard. I don't think he'd come in and expect to start for the Toronto Raptors, but maybe he could expect a little bit of a bigger role. And I don't know. He's unrestricted, but what do you think his role could potentially be with the Raptors? Because obviously we're hoping to re-sign Fred, Lowry, Norman Powell's there at the shooting guard position, Matt Thomas, TD. Would you like to see Jordan Clarkson get some of those minutes and be maybe more of a reliable scorer, or should we sort of hope that TD and Matt Thomas develop into one of these guys rather than paying Jordan Clarkson maybe $10 million or so a year?
Well, if you start bringing in players that are proven NBA players already, you're not going to significantly limit their minutes. You're going to give them run that they've been expecting and that they're used to over their career, and that limits the ability to develop players like Terrence Davis and Matt Thomas. The one argument I'd make that why you'd maybe consider a guy like Jordan Clarkson is we know that there's an expiration date on Kyle Lowry. We know that Fred VanVleet, maybe he won't get re-signed if Knicks or the Pistons come out and offer him $25 million or more. You know, maybe the Raptors legitimately want to look at a sign and trade, as we broke down with Victor Oladipo and Fred VanVleet, and you know, you want to push Victor Oladipo into a one position and have a guy come off the bench at a two, maybe slide Norm up. A lot of moving parts here, and I'd say it's not unreasonable to think that the Raptors could be looking at an established shooting guard to come off the bench and maybe give Norm some increased minutes, Ben.
Yeah, those are all points to bring up with, and he's not known for his defense, but he's 6'4", so he won't have that just undersized thing that a lot of these sort of players come in with. Even though Fred VanVleet's a phenomenal defender in terms of moving laterally, the inches do add up, so it's nice that he has a bit of height, but he isn't near the defender those types of guys are, but does have a bit of athleticism and different things. So I think it could be possible to pick him up maybe around the $10-11 million range, maybe 1 or 2 seasons, because he was just traded mid-year last year for Dante Exum, who really hasn't shown much in the NBA since his entire career, but even though he had a really promising start, but he dealt with injuries and stuff. So I don't know if his value is really high. So I think Jordan Clarkson's a guy that's underrated. No one's really talking about him. But Ryker, we got a few other guys to talk about. And number 2 on the list, Mason Plumlee. Just made the conference finals in the West. Has been playing behind Nikola Jokic for the last few seasons. Obviously, was a Portland Trailblazer before that. Was traded for Nurkic. But he's a guy that's been a backup center, but he's definitely one of the better backup centers in the league. He's mobile, athletic. He's a good passer. Maybe he could obviously he's not the three-point shooter a lot of people would like, but maybe he could make up for some of the passing that we'll likely lose with Marc Gasol leaving.
Ben, no.
No.
This one's a hard X for me. That three-point shooting, you can't understate. You can't just gloss over that he doesn't take threes, that he's not able to shoot at a high clip. And what happened to him come playoff time when they started playing smaller teams? His butt was on the bench, Ben, and that's the same thing that will happen for him if he was on the Raptors come playoff time, that when you need to have a more mobile guard, you need to shift down to that smaller lineup or small ball lineup, period. He's a guy that's going to be sitting. So to me, there's no point in bringing a guy like that around when there's a ton of promising or guys that have potential in that center free agent class this season.
Yeah, that's true. He only averaged about 10 minutes per game during the postseason, and that was down from his regular season average of about 17. So obviously he's kind of a guy that struggles to go up against a lot of these smaller ball units. But Ryker, we've sort of brought it up that if we lose Marc Gasol, which is looking likely, Serge Ibaka isn't known as like a big lumbering big. There are guys like Giannis and Joel Embiid still in the Eastern Conference that attack the rim and go at people in the paint. So having a bigger sort of rim-protecting athletic center, I think we're kind of underrating what Gasol has meant to this team. And I think, obviously, Mason Plumlee is not close to the level player Gasol is in terms of cerebralness, but his ability to just be big, be a wall, maybe in a Nick Nurse system could make him a decent enough rim protector, particularly against Joel and Giannis's of the world.
I don't see it the same. I don't see that benefit being enough to pay him as your backup big. And we're going to break down all of the centers basically in another video, or a good portion of them, because there's a lot of guys out there that we like that we're eyeing up. But I'm looking at he's only pulling down about 5 rebounds per game, about 7 points per game. What was our biggest issue with Marc? We had all this praise for him. I agree with what you're saying about his defense, his ability to stop the traditional big, his ability to pass and see the court. Some of those things you could say Mason Plumlee does do to a lesser extent. But this current season, when Marc Gasol was still doing those exact same things, but his offensive output went down from whatever it was, 8 points a game down to 4 points a game, 3 points a game, 0 threes made in the playoffs. We wanted to kick the guy off the team, send him back to Europe as fast as possible. Like, it was terrible. So that's the best that Mason Plumlee can give you. The best that he can give you is the worst that Marc Gasol could provide on the offensive end.
Yeah, fair enough. I'd only want Mason Plumlee to come in on sort of a smaller deal, but I think he's a guy that I wouldn't mind having as insurance. And if you go up against a team like the Celtics, then I think you could run Serge and OG at center, those small ball lineups, a lot more. But yeah, I agree. I think he'd be more useful against the bigger teams. And I think it's always nice to have that sort of type of player up your sleeve. And even the worst of Marc Gasol is great against the 76ers. So I just want to throw that out there. But another guy we got to throw out on the complete other end of the spectrum in terms of big men, Davis Bertans, who isn't known for the defense, Ryker, isn't known for sort of the athletic mobility underneath the rim, but he is known for lights out shooting. And, we've talked about having some more scoring firepower on this team. Raptors are known for having hyper athletic defenders that can slash and do different things, but just having a guy that can really stroke it and be on the court. Obviously, Matt Thomas is one of those guys, but Davis Bertans is much taller, a forward. he really helped that Wizards offense this season, Riker.
Well, he shot 3 seasons now at 40% from 3. 3 of his 4 seasons in the NBA, he shot 40% plus from beyond the arc, and his other season was 37%. This year he was making almost 4 on 9 attempts. Like, this guy, he's not afraid to go out there and shoot. But Ben, you say he's not known for his defense. I think this guy is known for how particularly atrocious he is on defense. That worries me, Ben. I think that is a very big thing. You can't normally hide your center. You can hide a guard if they're not as bad, or if they're pretty bad on defense with your team. Your ability to play help D. But I don't know if you can hide a center in the same way.
Wait, you can't hide your rim protector on defense, right?
Well, can we have Matt Thomas come in and just start blocking shots?
Matt Thomas and Davis Bertans front court. I'm proposing that to Masai Ujiri next season. But on a serious, I don't think we run Bertans at center, or if we do, we're running him with like OG to actually handle the defensive load, or because if he's out there with Serge will just be the de facto center. But I look at Bertans as more of a really big small forward just for shooting in a Danilo Gallinari role, or more of his natural position at power forward and be sort of Siakam's backup. But if we have Siakam struggling at times to get his game going, or someone in the front, even OG, he might not be, he's not always the most consistent player, but even though we expect both of those guys to have big jumps, just being able to have a guy to come in and get buckets from the three-point line, I feel like that could be really valuable, especially when, as you mentioned, we'd have to hide him on defense, but the Raptors have had a top 3 defense seemingly every season for the past few years, so it might not hurt us that much to have a guy just be able to come in and get buckets and maybe leave a little bit to be desired on the defensive end.
Ben, I think that a main contributing factor to why the Raptors have had top 3 defenses in the league is because they avoid signing players that can't play defense. So I would be shocked if a guy like this ever, suits up as a Toronto Raptor. But who knows? Masai Ujiri is not above shaking up the mold and trying new things.
Yeah, man, that Wizards team, they were good, but they were really fun to watch. They scored a lot of points. They let a lot of points be scored on them with like Isaiah Thomas and Bertans and different players, but they were fun to watch last season. But another guy that sort of plays that small forward, power forward position in the complete opposite mold, once again, another switch up, Jae Crowder, who more so fits a traditional Raptors player, a great defender. His three-point shooting has seemingly come back to life this season. It disappeared for a long time, but it came back for the Miami Heat. He went from shooting, even this year, Riker, just look at how jarring this difference is. With the Memphis Grizzlies, he was shooting 29% from the three-point line, completely switched it up to 45% from 3. So that's a guy that I don't know if that's going to translate over into next season. Obviously, it's a smaller sample size with the Miami Heat, but ever since he's been back on a stable, a well-coached team, his defense is amped up, his three-point shooting, his three-point shots have just been raining down, and he's been a huge factor to them making the finals. If you asked me 6 months ago what I think Jae Crowder would get this season, I'd say, definitely below 10, but definitely below 7 million. Just the way he was a 3, and he's turning into that DeMar Carroll-esque player, a 3-and-D guy that couldn't really knock down threes and was okay defender, but he's completely flipped that switch. Do you think it would be possible for us to get him, and do you think it would be smart if he can continue this level of play? He's only 29 years old.
Well, this is what's very startling, Ben, is that DeMar Carroll, you brought him up. Everybody's going to bring him up. They almost look the same, same style hair, similar style offense, but you could make the exact same argument about DeMar Carroll entering his last season at Atlanta. Hey, this guy, he's making a second run at his three-point shooting. He's had a couple of bad years before. Now he's shooting 39.5%. Let's bring him in as a Toronto Raptor. And we all know what happened. One of our most beloved segments is still named the DeMar Carroll Gold Star for worst performance for a reason, Ben. So I would be terrified to pull the trigger on this potential signing. That's fair.
Remember Jae Crowder and DeMar Carroll always used to get in beefs when DeMar was the Raptors starting small forward and Jae was the Celtics?
Yeah, but it was because it was the Celtics.
That's true, but they used to get in like Twitter battles and stuff. That was Yeah, you might be right on that one. I guess for PTSD sake of Toronto Raptors fans, we'll leave Jae Crowder's name out of the rest of the discussions. But finally, we're getting into, I guess, someone that might turn Raptors fans' heads a little bit more. One of the Morris twins, Riker. I'm saying either one. Marcus Morris is a bit more of a chucker. They're both chuckers, but Morris is a little bit better chucker and scorer. Well, Markieff, I think, plays a little bit better within the team, but they're both guys that have solid range, love to shoot. As we've said with a lot of these guys, they can score, not horrible on defense. Would you want a Morris twin on the roster? Because Markieff was rumored to actually come to the Raptors midway through this season, but he said the top of his list were the Lakers and the Raptors, and obviously ended up joining LeBron. But would you want to see either of these guys with our team?
Well, it's funny how much we despise the Clippers and the players and their antics specifically, and now we're talking about Montrezl Harrell, we're talking about Marcus Morris, but ultimately, I still like their gameplay. I like both of them. They can play inside and out. They have that kind of grit. They're not amazing at anything they do, but they're serviceable if you put them around a good enough team. They're not always reliable, but I think that they could actually add something nice and something kind of level from that veteran sort of leadership perspective, but then also still being able to score. I like Marcus Morris a little bit more than Markieff Morris, just because you're absolutely right. He's a bit more of a chucker. He's a bit more of a scorer than his twin, but I don't know. I think either could be a clean pickup.
Yeah, I don't know. I see where you're coming from, and I one part of me says I'd really like their scoring, but the other part of me just doesn't. People used to get on DeMar for ball stopping, and obviously we ran our offense through DeMar a lot, but neither of these Morris twins are stars, and particularly Marcus, they are ball stoppers, and they just let it fly. They start dribbling, they start doing these things, and I feel like it could be a little bit of a risk to our offense, but Marcus Morris, really just watching Celtics fans talking about him, watching Celtics games, when they have that free-flowing offense that we saw in the playoffs, that would just always be put completely to a halt when Marcus Morris was on the court. So, I don't know. I don't know if he'd be the perfect pickup for the Raptors, but if you don't have anything more on the Morris twins, we got one last sort of talk about, and then we have a little bonus one, Riker.
All right. Well, I just want to say, though, but Ben, his 3-point shooting in the playoffs, Marcus Morris, absolutely goes to another level. Like, he shoots almost 50% from three when playoff time comes. So, we have a lot of issue with players that seem to regress in the biggest moments, whereas this guy seems to suck throughout regular seasons, and all of a sudden you put him under the limelight and he just comes alive. So, for everything you could say, we also need to say, maybe I could handle a bit of mischief and a bit of debauchery on the team if this guy's ultimately going to come in and hit 2 of 4 threes per game,
Yeah, you may be right. Like, I'm on the fence with the Morris twins. Just wanted to sort of lay both sides out there. But the final sort of little topic, I think we're going over 5 right now, but having a backup point guard. This is particularly if Fred VanVleet leaves, if he ends up signing, as you mentioned, somewhere else. But having a guy like Trey Burke or Reggie Jackson come in, Riker, one of those types of players. Which one of those guys? Because Trey Burke obviously had the phenomenal postseason with the Dallas Mavericks. He looked completely unstoppable on the Patrick Beverleys of the world, those types of guys, on Reggie Jackson who was guarding him. But he could potentially be good, and he's been floating around the league left and right. But and then there's Reggie Jackson, who has had more of a successful career, has gotten paid, I guess. That's more to say. Has been a bit more of an established player, but obviously has really struggled in Detroit, at the last years in Detroit with injuries, and then joined the Clippers, and people said he shouldn't have been a part of the rotation. So, would you want either of those guys as maybe a cheap backup if, Fred VanVleet leaves and we don't really know what to do with that position, Riker?
The thing is, the curious case of Reggie Jackson is that he did do enough in the NBA to get paid, exactly like you said. But what is a little bit deceiving about him, and I didn't realize until doing a little bit of research for this podcast, is he's bad from beyond the arc. Like, I didn't know that he was actually not an efficient 3-point shooter at all. And that's a guy that would really kind of scare me to bring in as a replacement or a backup to the replacement for Fred VanVleet. Because really, I could only see losing Fred VanVleet. I could only see not signing him if there's another move to be made. And the most promising, the most likely move, exactly, Victor Oladipo. But he's a natural 2. So if he becomes the natural 2, Lowry kind of slides out of the frame. Maybe Norm. Maybe they play Norman Depot in the backcourt. I'm not sure. The whole you can break that down in a whole other podcast basically. But I don't know if Reggie Jackson, if he can't even shoot the 3, what's the point of having him come off the bench at the 1 position? So I'm liking Trey Burke, Ben.
Trey Burke, yeah. Out of those two, I'd agree with Trey Burke. But Ryker, there's one other player we got to talk about. This is the little bonus player we have in this podcast, and I know he's your favorite guy. I just listened to one of his speaking on the JJ Redick podcast, but Carmelo Anthony has made his triumphant return to the NBA this season, and obviously the Portland Trail Blazers, they were pretty good when they were healthy. They had all their guys back, but maybe Melo wants to go to a real title contender. The Toronto Raptors, maybe he could be that last piece to put us over the edge. And being the Melo fan you are, Ryker, diehard, how much would you want to pay Carmelo Anthony to come to this team? Max?
Ben, this is going to be hard for people because we have a lot of new viewership on this podcast. And you know what? I feel like a lot of those viewers aren't going to make it this far. It's probably only the diehards. You guys know. Y'all know how much I hate this man. My analogy is like teams are like balloons. NBA players are balloons. Collectively, they're like those cute bundle of balloons that you give the little kids for their birthday parties and whatnot. And he is the one thing in the NBA that holds those balloons down. He tethers them. He's like a rock. He's poison for any team. He's terrible. He's awful. And it made me sad that he was actually decent in some games for Portland because it took the spotlight off of how terrible his career has been in the NBA, Ben. You talk about a ball stopper. This guy, he's a ball black hole. He sucks.
So, Max.
So, not even a penny. I wouldn't, if somebody's like, I'll give you $20 million to take Carmelo Anthony, I would still say, no, sir.
Jeez. Well, let us know in the comment section below if you agree with that take. The rest of them, lots of interesting topics we're going to be breaking down on the channel. But yeah, you guys are the best to make this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Ryker, any last words on this pod?
Nope. That's it for me, Ben. Cheers.